am so excited to bring my Jesus journey today. Years ago, when we hadn't been married very long, uh, we were living here in Indianapolis, and Patrick's parents had a 50-acre farm, and they decided to sell it to a development company. And in the process of it, they offered us an acre to build a house. We really didn't want to live next to his parents. We didn't get along terrifically well with them. Living across the yard from their house wasn't exactly where I thought would be the emotionally most healthy place to live. And Patrick, my husband, didn't either. So we had to really pray about it. And in praying about it, both of us felt like, yes, that's what God wanted us to do. So I'm like, oh, God, okay. All right, this is a big one, but if that's what you're telling us to do, okay. So I was walking the perimeter of this acre and I was praying over it. And I felt like God said, this is your promised land. Like, wow, promised land. And the first thing that came to my mind was the children of Israel got sent out from the promised land. That's not good. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. They got sent out because they got into some evil stuff. We're not going to do that. So we're going to be okay. So then it was, how big do we make the house? Because we were going to custom build our house. And so we started praying about it, and I felt like God wanted us to make our house bigger. We had a family of 5 at the time, and my husband felt like he was getting, yeah, make it bigger. And but my mind was like, no, God wants us to be fiscally responsible. He would want us to make our house smaller. So my husband's like, well, let's get some people we think know and hear from God and see what they get. Just not tell them what we're hearing, but just ask them to pray about the size of our house. And so we asked them to pray, and they're like, God's saying go bigger than you think you should. And I'm like, that just doesn't make sense. God would want us to be, my mind, God wants us to be fiscally responsible. He would not want us to go bigger. That just doesn't make sense to me. And so I was reading in the word and came to Isaiah 54:2, which says, enlarge the place of your tent, let them stretch out the curtains of your dwellings, do not spare, lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes. I'm like, okay, God, all right. I'm hearing what you're saying. We're going to go bigger. So we went way bigger than I wanted to go. And in the process of that, God said, I want you to make your home a house of ministry and hospitality. I'm like, oh, okay. I don't know how to do that, but we'll give it a shot. Sure, we'll give it a whirl. So we built the house, and then we had baby number 4, which was a surprise. But we got her here too. And when we were coming back from the 6-week checkup, my husband's a professor, and he had been on 2-year positions as a visiting professor. And when he had gotten hired on it the first time, he had come on with the expectation, the dean had said, we're giving you 2-year positions, but we want to bring you in for a tenure track job. So that's how we would come in. And then he left the university. So then 9/11 had happened, and the funding for his position disappeared. So there we are, the promised land. Funding's gone for his job, so we have no job. And Patrick gets a job in Ithaca, New York, at a university there. And so we're sitting in the house, newborn. We have a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, and we're moving to New York. And I'm like, whoa. And okay, we looked at it. I'm like, okay, there's no disobedience that we could ever see or anything we had done wrong. It's just, we have to move. So it's like it was a blow. This was our dream house. We had, it was tough. So I'm like, Lord, you said this was our promised land. You gave this to us. You can give it back. If this is you, which I believe it is, you can give this back to us. So we moved to New York, and then had to come back and visit Patrick's family and look at our dream home with somebody else living there. And the guy who bought it did not want to buy our house. We live in the middle of Indianapolis, which was a great moving market. The realtor that we got kept making mistakes, could not list our house right, could not do anything right in the selling of our house. So only one guy would come and look at it, and then he'd go put an offer on another house, which would fall through. And like a month later, it'd come through our house again, go put an offer. This happened 3 times. Finally, he gave up, bought our house. So we're living in Ithaca, New York, with a much tinier house for the exact same amount of money. Like, so we were like sardines in this household. Coming back, looking at our dream house, which was very painful, going back to New York. And the guy that's living here goes to Patrick's dad and said, I'm not supposed to be living in this house. Your kids are supposed to be living in this house. Sells the house back to Patrick's dad without asking us. He buys it and starts paying on the mortgage of this house. And we're like, we can't just move back to Indiana because Patrick's an economist. So the higher you go up in the level of academics, the more specialized you get. So he's a labor economist. So it's not just, oh, we need a professor of economics. We need a labor economist, and they just don't open up anywhere. It's very difficult to get a job. So we couldn't just move back to Indianapolis. So we ended up being there for many, many years, coming back, looking at our house, going, wouldn't it be nice to live there? Going back to Indiana. One day I get this vision, and it's this map of the United States, and this hand comes out of Indiana, comes to New York, grabs Patrick only, takes him back to Indiana. And I said, oh Lord, what about me and the kids? And he said, you will move back in a laughing brook. Like, I've done a lot of moves. We've done a lot of moves, and they've all been grueling and nightmares, and I've had like migraines. None of them have been laughing brooks. I would love to see that. I would love to see what a laughing brook would look like. That would be great. So 2 years later, Indiana University and Purdue University have a conglomerate university together in Indianapolis. It's called IUPUI. Our kids call it Ooey Pooey. And they offered a job to Patrick. So he gave up, he got tenure at Ithaca College in New York. And he's like, Lisa, God wants us to move to Indianapolis. And we're going to, give up a tenured position and go take this senior lecturer position at Indianapolis to do it. Like, oh, okay. If that's what God's leading you to do, that's what we will do. And so the way it worked out in the negotiations and timing, he ended up moving a semester before the kids and I, because I had 2 kids in college and they needed to finish out their semesters there, but they needed him here. So he went a whole semester before we did, just like in that vision that I had. I'm like, well, that goes along with the vision. Everything's, going back. We had a house to move back into. I mean, everything was going as planned. So then we go to move. Well, I've got, what do we have? A 20-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 12-year-old who were very angry that we're moving. It was not a laughing brook move. It was a nightmare move. We almost hit, I don't know how many cars we had in a moving van as we made this move from New York. It was an 18-hour move. We almost hit a deer. We had a deluge of rain, and my 20-year-old, her windshield wipers quit moving. So we had to get off the highway to deal with that. Every time we'd go through the gas station, we had to get everybody's vehicle filled up with gas, and the credit card would quit working. So then I'd have to call the credit card company and say, we're filling up all our vehicles. Would you please restart it? Would you please let them know that this is what we're doing? So every time we go through, and they're like, sorry, we can't do that. So it was just horrific kind of a move. And so I'm like, Lord, everything else in that vision was lining up, but I would really like to understand the laughing brook, because we didn't get the laughing brook. And so it was a couple years, and I'm still not getting the laughing brook, and I'm still not, it's like, Lord, I just really want to get the laughing brook. And then Patrick comes to me one day, Lisa, I got the laughing brook. And it's a poem by William Herschel called Ain't God Good to Indiana. Ain't God good to Indiana? Folks, a feller never knows just how close he is to Eden, till sometime he ups and goes. sinking fairer, greener pastures than he has right here at home, where there's sunshine in the clover and honey in the comb, where the ripples on the river kind of chuckles as they flow. Ain't God good to Indiana? Ain't he, fellers? Ain't he, though? So that ripple on the river kind of chuckles as they flow. He goes, that's the Laughing Brook, Lisa. That's the Laughing Brook. And so I went to God. I'm like, Lord, is that our Laughing Brook? He's like, yes, it is. He goes, because there's laughter in the spirit when you walk into the promise. And I'm like, oh, that's what it is. So when we've got to walk back into our promised land, the promise that he gave us, we lost it for 11 years, right? We got kicked out of the promised land. But it's like, Lord, I know that your promises are true and you are faithful. So whatever reason that assignment against us got us kicked out, it's like, Lord, I know you're a good God. I know what you say is true. I know that you have good things for us. And I know your promised land is full of blessings for us, and you will get us back to that. And here we are back in our home. We've been here since 2014. And it's just the goodness of God in the land of the living. And we've been able to minister to people in this house, took care of a friend's newborn twins for a couple weeks back before my youngest was born. And recently one of the twins just got married, so we got to go see her. That was pretty cool. And a lot of survivors have come through and stayed with us at different points, and different people that's needed ministry, and we've got the room to do it because we went bigger even when it didn't make any sense to me. Sometimes I'm a little thick-headed with God, and he just gives me the time to figure it out. And sometimes he says things to us that doesn't make sense to our head, you know, and he knows that we have to work through it and try to figure it out. And he gives us that space to get there. And I like that about him. He knows that our minds don't work quite the way his does. And he gives us that space to get there. And so, living in the promises of God is just where we all are, really. Just we've got his word, and that's all. His words are filled with the promises, and it's just kind of fun. It's an adventure. And so we got kicked out for 11 years, but there's the promises there too. It's just what's God saying and what's he doing and where's he leading and where is he guiding? And it's just been quite a fun adventure in life in many ways. Some of it's uncomfortable and some of it's confusing, but it's definitely a Jesus journey, and I'm enjoying the process of that. So thank you.